8 elite SEALs were caught in a death trap, their communications cut, their hope gone. They were about to be wiped out. Then, a single impossible shot from an unknown guardian shattered the enemy's perfect ambush. The air in the armory at Forward Operating Base Atlas was a thick cocktail of diesel fumes, hot metal, and the ever-present, cloying dust of the Afghan highlands. It was a place of purpose, of preparation for violence, and every surface seemed coated in a fine layer of grit and tension. Here, amidst the racks of rifles and crates of ammunition, Ava Reed worked in a bubble of profound silence. At 30, she possessed a stillness that was almost unnerving in a place humming with the nervous energy of young men about to face death. Her movements were economical, precise, each action flowing into the next with a practiced grace that bordered on the robotic as she meticulously serviced a high-performance sniper rifle. Her focus was absolute. Her world shrunk to the gleaming barrel, the finely machined bolt, and the complex optics she was calibrating. The only thing that betrayed the machine-like efficiency was the sleek, dark gray device strapped to her left wrist. It wasn't a watch. It was a neurostimulator brace, a piece of advanced medical tech whose tiny indicator light pulsed with a soft, rhythmic blue glow. It was a constant, quiet reminder of a failure she could never outrun, a whisper of damaged nerves beneath her pale skin. The relative quiet of the armory was shattered by a loud, brash voice that dripped with the unearned confidence of youth. "Hey, Miller," called Specialist Jax Thorne, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. He was a new addition to the SEAL team stationed at Atlas, fresh from sniper school, with a physique that looked like it was carved from granite and an ego to match. He gestured with his chin toward Ava, a smirk playing on his lips. "Looks like they've got the den mothers handling our gear now. Hope she doesn't break a nail on my baby." His squad mate, Miller, shifted uncomfortably. He glanced from Thorne's arrogant grin to Ava's back. She didn't flinch. She didn't turn. She simply continued her work as if Thorne and his comment were nothing more than background noise, like the distant whine of a generator. What Thorne, in his casual cruelty, failed to notice were the details that would have given a more experienced soldier pause. He didn't see the way Ava's eyes, a startlingly clear shade of gray, briefly flickered towards the armory's main entrance as he and Miller had walked in, cataloging them before she returned to her task. He didn't see how her body was naturally angled, not for comfort, but to provide a clear line of sight to every potential point of entry and exit, a subconscious posture of tactical awareness. He didn't see the ghost of a muscle memory that had been forged in the crucible of real-world combat, a world far removed from the sterile firing ranges of sniper school. To him, she was just part of the support staff, an overlooked cog in the great machine of war, a woman with a limp wrist and quiet demeanor who was there to make sure his tools were clean. He was a warrior. She was a mechanic. In his mind, the hierarchy was simple and absolute. Thorne, emboldened by the lack of reaction and the sycophantic chuckles of a few junior soldiers loitering nearby, decided to press his advantage. He sauntered closer, leaning against a weapon rack with feigned casualness, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I heard the reason they stick people like her in these rear echelon jobs," he announced, "is because they screwed up on a real op, probably got someone killed. Isn't that right? A liability on the trigger, so they put him on the wrench." The words hung in the dusty air, thick and toxic. The other soldiers fell silent, the casual banter dying on their lips. It was one thing to joke about equipment. It was another to accuse someone of failing in combat. The accusation, whether true or not, was a profound taboo, a violation of the unspoken code that bound them all. Peer pressure and the rigid military hierarchy kept them from speaking up, but their discomfort was a palpable force in the room. For the first time, Ava's movement ceased. Her hand, which had been polishing a rifle scope with a microfiber cloth, paused mid-swipe. The knuckles on her right hand whitened as her grip tightened. For a fleeting second, a flicker of something cold and dangerous ignited in her gray eyes. The dispassionate calculus of a predator deciding if the prey was worth the effort. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that unnerving calm. She placed the scope down with deliberate, almost reverent care and slowly turned to face Jack's Thorne directly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her quiet tone cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "You're right about one thing, specialist," she said, her voice even and devoid of emotion. "A liability on the trigger can get people killed." She took a step towards him, her gaze locking onto the custom-modified rifle he cradled protectively. "Your scope," she stated, not asked. "It's a Schmidt and Bender 5-25x56 PM2. You've adjusted the parallax for a 100-meter zero, but your windage turret isn't perfectly calibrated. It's off by 1/8 of a minute of angle." Thorne's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "What are you talking about? It's perfect. I zeroed it myself. At 100 meters, that error is negligible." Ava continued, her voice a low, clinical lecture. "At 800 meters, you'll miss your target's center mass by 6 inches. At 1,500 meters under pressure with a crosswind, you'll miss entirely. You might hit his spotter. You might hit a civilian." During Operation Red Sands, a similar miscalculation by a shooter from the 75th Ranger Regiment resulted in a friendly fire incident that cost 2 lives. She let the statement hang in the air. Operation Red Sands was a classified disaster, a footnote in a redacted report that Thorne would have no knowledge of. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Thorne was speechless, his arrogance punctured by the sheer, undeniable weight of her expertise. Before he could formulate a response, a new voice filled the space, a voice that carried the effortless authority of command. "Is there a problem here, specialist?" Captain Marcus Holloway stood in the doorway, his gaze sweeping across the scene. He was a man in his late 40s, with the weary eyes of someone who had seen too many young soldiers like Thorne come and go. He took in Thorne's blustering silence and Ava's quiet intensity, and he understood immediately. He had seen her file. He knew what the blacked-out lines and classified stamps were hiding. His eyes met Ava's, and in that brief glance, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. "Read," he said, his tone shifting to one of clear respect. "My office. Now." The walk to Captain Holloway's office was a journey through the labyrinthine corridors of FOB Atlas, a maze of sand-colored shipping containers and prefabricated buildings that served as the nerve center for operations in the sector. Holloway remained silent, his brow furrowed in thought, occasionally glancing at the quiet woman walking beside him. His office was a small, functional space, dominated by a large digital map of Afghanistan that glowed with tactical overlays. "You didn't have to do that," Holloway said, closing the door behind them. "You don't have to prove anything to boys like Thorne. He's deploying tonight," Ava replied, her voice flat. "He's leading a sniper overwatch team. If his arrogance gets him killed, that's his choice. If his miscalibrated scope gets his team killed, that's my responsibility. I serviced the weapon." Holloway sighed, running a hand over his tired face. He gestured for her to sit as he pulled up her personnel file on his tablet. Most of it was a sea of black redactions, impenetrable walls of classified ink. But a few words had escaped the censor's pen. "Task Force Strix," he said quietly, reading the designation aloud. "In 20 years of service, I've only ever seen that name whispered. A ghost unit. Urban legend, mostly." The name hung in the air, and for a moment, Ava's composure cracked. Her gaze drifted to the glowing map, but she wasn't seeing the terrain of Afghanistan. She was seeing a different valley, 5 years in the past. Task Force Strix, the Night Owls. They hadn't been a legend. They had been a scalpel in the dark, a collection of the military's most elite precision shooters, deployed for missions that officially never happened. Their successes were buried, their failures erased. Ava had been their youngest member, recruited for a shot she'd made in a sandstorm that had saved an entire platoon. They had called her Phantom. Her mind summoned the face of Leo, her spotter, her best friend. The memory was sharp, painful, a piece of shrapnel lodged in her soul. She remembered the mission, the intelligence that had been too good to be true, the perfectly orchestrated ambush. She remembered the explosion that had thrown her through the air, the searing pain in her left arm, and the high-pitched ringing in her ears that had never truly gone away. She remembered crawling towards Leo, whispering apologies as his life bled out onto the unforgiving ground, all because of a trap she hadn't seen until it was too late. The nerve damage in her wrist and the tinnitus in her ear were her permanent souvenirs from that day. They were real, she said, her voice barely a whisper, pulling herself back to the present. And they're all dead, because someone fed us intelligence designed to lead us into a kill box. Holloway's expression was grim. He knew the official story, a tragic training accident. He also knew the truth was far more sinister. He tapped his tablet, bringing up a new file. "That's why I called you in," he said, his voice low and serious. "I need a favor." Holloway slid the tablet across the desk towards Ava. Displayed on the screen were the mission parameters for tonight's operation, codenamed Hunter. It was Jax Thorne's mission. The objective was a high-value target, a Taliban subcommander, located in a remote mountain compound. The intelligence package was incredibly detailed. Satellite imagery, informant reports, signal intercepts. It was by all accounts a textbook mission plan. "The intel is too clean," Holloway stated, echoing the very thought that was forming in Ava's mind. "It's perfect. Every piece fits together without a single question mark. It reminds me of..." He trailed off, but he didn't need to finish the sentence. "Of a trap," Ava finished for him, her eyes scanning the data with an intensity that made the screen seem to hum. Her fingers flew across the tablet surface, cross-referencing data points, pulling up archived reports, her mind working like a supercomputer. The patterns were there, subtle, but undeniable to someone who knew what to look for. The enemy's communication patterns showed a sudden, artificial drop in traffic around the target area, a classic sign of a unit going silent to set an ambush. The informant who provided the key intelligence had a history of providing low-level, accurate tips, the perfect way to build credibility before delivering the poison apple. "It's the same signature," she said, her voice tight with a mixture of dread and vindication. "It's the exact same methodology they use to take out Strix. Someone is feeding our command a carefully constructed narrative, baiting a high-value asset like a SEAL team into a pre-designated kill zone." Holloway paced the small office, his frustration a palpable force. "I've raised my concerns with command. They see a perfect intelligence package and a green light. They won't abort a mission based on the gut feeling of a field captain and the pattern analysis of an armory technician. Without concrete, actionable evidence, my hands are tied. The bureaucracy, the rigid adherence to protocol, was a wall they couldn't break through." Ava looked up from the tablet, her gray eyes locking with his. The quiet, unassuming mechanic was gone. In her place sat Phantom, the analyst, the hunter. "You can't officially change the mission," she said, "but you can authorize a non-standard overwatch." She let the suggestion hang in the air, a calculated gambit. "Give me access to the long-range communications array and a quiet corner to work in, and I'll need my old equipment." Holloway studied her for a long moment, seeing the ghosts in her eyes and the unyielding steel behind them. He knew he was crossing a line, operating outside the bounds of his authority. But he also knew that the lives of 8 men were at stake. He gave a single, decisive nod. "Whatever you need, Reed, it's yours." As dusk bled across the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush, the twin rotors of a Black Hawk helicopter beat a rhythmic tattoo against the cooling air. Inside, SEAL Team Hunter, led by Jax Thorne, sat in grim silence, the red glow of the cabin lights painting their faces in demonic hues. The flight to the insertion point was tense, the bravado from the armory replaced by the focused, professional calm that precedes combat. The intelligence was perfect, the plan was solid. It was the kind of mission they had trained for relentlessly. Yet, an unspoken unease settled over the team. It felt too easy. They fast-roped into the designated landing zone, a rocky plateau shrouded in darkness, and moved out with the silent efficiency of predators. The valley they entered was a natural funnel, a deep, winding ravine with steep, rocky walls. The target compound was supposed to be another 2 kilometers ahead. They were less than halfway there when the world exploded. The night erupted in a cacophony of fire and death. Green tracers from multiple heavy machine guns stitched across the ravine from 3 different elevated positions, creating a perfect, inescapable crossfire. Muzzle flashes flickered from dozens of hidden positions along the ridges. It wasn't a hasty ambush. It was a meticulously prepared kill box. The enemy knew their exact route, their numbers, their tactics. Thorne's 2 designated snipers, positioned to provide overwatch as the team advanced, were the first to die. 2 single, expert shots from the darkness, and the team's eyes were gone. Thorne screamed into his comms, "Contact! Contact! 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock high." But his voice was swallowed by a blast of static. Their communications were being jammed by a powerful, sophisticated system. The SEALs, the best trained soldiers in the world, were reduced to fish in a barrel. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around them, kicking up sparks and stone fragments. They returned fire, but they were shooting at ghosts, at muzzle flashes that appeared and vanished. The enemy was dug in, protected, and held all the advantages. The walls of the ravine, which were supposed to offer cover, now felt like the sides of a coffin. Back at FOB Atlas, in a darkened, forgotten corner of the communications building, Ava Reed watched the unfolding disaster on a series of monitors she had jury-rigged together. Her custom software, designed to slice through enemy jamming, fed her fragmented data streams. A split second of audio, a corrupted video feed, a blip of biometric data from a SEAL's wrist monitor. She heard Thorne's initial panic call. She saw the muzzle flashes bloom on a thermal overlay. She saw the biometric signs of 2 SEALs flatline. The official channels were a mess of confusion and frantic, unanswered calls. "Hunter Team, this is Atlas Command. Do you copy? What is your status? Over." The calls went into the void. The quick reaction force was still 30 minutes away. Air support was grounded by a sudden, localized storm system that hadn't been on any forecast. Another part of the enemy's meticulous plan. Every second that ticked by was another second the men of Hunter Team bled out in that valley. Ava listened to the symphony of destruction, her face an emotionless mask, but her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. She could hear the distinctive crack of the SEAL's M4 carbines, but they were being overwhelmed by the relentless, hammering rhythm of the enemy's PKM machine guns. She heard Thorne's voice, no longer arrogant, but clipped and professional, trying to rally his men, calling out targets he could barely see. They were good, they were brave, and they were going to die. The official response would be too little, too late. A rescue mission into a prepared kill zone would just result in more casualties. The men of Hunter Team were deemed expendable by circumstance. A choice crystallized in the space between one heartbeat and the next. It wasn't even a choice, it was an imperative. She couldn't save Leo. She couldn't save the other members of Task Force Strix. But she could save these men. She could save the arrogant boy who had mocked her because his life and the lives of his teammates mattered more than her pain or her past. She stood up and moved to a large, dust-covered Pelican case that had been stored in the corner of the room. With a series of clicks, she opened the latches. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay a Chaytak M300 Intervention sniper rifle. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a tool capable of reaching out and touching a target from over 2 kilometers away. It was her old rifle. It hadn't seen the light of day in 5 years. On the stock, almost invisible in the dim light, were 3 small, carefully carved notches. Leo, Marcus, Javier. Her hands moved with a life of their own, a blur of practiced motion as she assembled the weapon. The heavy barrel locked into the receiver. The scope clicked into place on the Picatinny rail. The bipod was deployed. It was a ritual, a sacred act of summoning a part of herself she had tried to bury. The tremor in her left hand, the constant companion of her waking hours, was gone. The neurostimulator on her wrist pulsed steadily. In its place was the rock-steady calm of a surgeon before a critical operation. She loaded the magazine with custom, hand-loaded .408 Chaytak rounds, bullets that were more like small missiles, each one a perfect marriage of brass, powder, and lead, designed for one purpose: impossible accuracy at extreme range. The weight of the rifle in her hands felt like an old friend, a heavy burden, and a path to redemption all at once. Moving through the darkened corridors of FOB Atlas, Ava was a ghost. She had spent 2 years in self-imposed exile within these walls, and in her solitude, she had learned its secrets. She knew every blind spot in the security camera coverage, every shadow that could hide a human form, every creak of a floorboard. She slipped out of the perimeter fence through a gap she had discovered months ago, a flaw in the base's otherwise impenetrable security, and melted into the Afghan night. The weight of the M300 on her shoulder was a familiar burden, 18 pounds of cold, hard purpose. The route she took was not on any map. It was a treacherous goat path, a smuggler's trail she had identified during her obsessive, lonely studies of the surrounding topography. It was a brutal, near-vertical climb over loose shale and through thorn bushes that tore at her clothes and skin. To anyone else, it would be impassable in the dark. To Ava, it was a staircase. As she climbed, her mind was a whirlwind of data. Her tablet, strapped to her forearm, displayed a real-time analysis of the battlefield. The advanced signal processing software, originally designed for high-frequency stock trading and repurposed for war, was cutting through the enemy's jamming, identifying the location of the enemy commander by triangulating his brief, encrypted transmissions. The technology gave her an advantage the enemy couldn't possibly anticipate. They had planned for a SEAL team. They hadn't planned for a ghost with a supercomputer. Every step was measured against the sounds of the battle echoing from the valley below. The staccato rhythm of the SEALs' rifles was becoming sporadic, weaker. They were running low on ammunition. She could hear fragments of their comms traffic, a call for more ammo, a report of another man down. Time was no longer measured in minutes, but in heartbeats and bullets, and both were running out. Her damaged left ear made it difficult to pinpoint sounds, the world a slightly unbalanced soundscape. But years of compensating for the deficiency had honed her other senses, her muscle memory guiding her through the treacherous terrain in near-total darkness. She saved her night vision goggles for the final approach, relying on instinct and memory. At 2:47, after a grueling 40-minute climb that would have broken most soldiers, she reached her destination. It wasn't just a good sniper position, it was a perfect one. A natural hide, a small nook in a weathered rock outcropping that she had picked out on a map weeks ago. It offered a clear, commanding view of the entire valley, while remaining completely invisible from below. The climb was over. The hunt was about to begin. Ava settled into the shooting position, her body molding to the cold rock as if she were born to it. The M300 felt like an extension of her own will. She deployed the bipod, chamber round, and peered through the scope. The world snapped into sharp, thermal image focus. The battlefield was laid out below her like a macabre chessboard, and death was winning. The enemy's setup was brutally professional. 3 heavy machine gun nests formed a triangle of death, their interlocking fields of fire making any escape attempt suicidal. Over 20 fighters, moving in disciplined fire teams, were systematically tightening the noose around the trapped SEALs. Their movements spoke of extensive training, a level of sophistication far beyond that of typical insurgents. This was a dedicated hunter-killer force. Ava's mind processed the scene with terrifying speed, the data from her tablet merging with the visual information from her scope. Ranging data materialized in her mind's eye without conscious thought, 2,147 meters to the primary machine gun nest, 15 miles per hour crosswind from the west, 67% humidity, 312-meter elevation difference. Her brain was a ballistic computer, her intuition honed by 1,000 similar calculations. Her first shot would be the most important. It would not be aimed at the enemy commander. That would come later. First, she needed to sow chaos. She needed to shatter their perfect plan and turn their confidence into confusion. Her target was a small, glowing rectangle of light tucked behind a rock formation 600 meters from the SEAL's position. It was the tablet of the enemy's forward air controller, the man coordinating their jamming and likely a drone operator. It was a strange choice, but to a master of psychological warfare, it made perfect sense. She controlled her breathing, her heartbeat slowing to a steady, powerful rhythm. In the space between one beat and the next, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, its report a deafening crack that shattered the mountain silence. For 1.5 seconds, the bullet tore through the night air. It struck the tablet, which exploded in a shower of sparks, glass, and metal fragments, peppering the controller's face. It wasn't a kill shot. It was something far more effective. A wounded, screaming enemy, blinded and confused, his ability to coordinate the attack instantly neutralized. What the hell was that? Thorne's voice, laced with disbelief, crackled through the intercepted comms. The enemy fire, once disciplined and rhythmic, became sporadic and panicked. The fighters shouted to each other, trying to locate the source of the impossible shot. Ava had already shifted her position slightly within her hide. 40 seconds later, the second shot followed. This time, it struck the ammunition feed of the Easter machine gun. The weapon jammed catastrophically, the gunner frantically trying to clear it, exposing himself to fire. Sergeant Reeves, the SEAL team leader, saw the opening instantly. Covering fire. Eastern Ridge. Go, go, go. The rhythm of the battle had changed. Ava was the conductor of a deadly orchestra. Each shot was a carefully chosen note in a symphony of destruction. She wounded when she could have killed, creating casualties that had to be cared for. She disabled equipment, sowing frustration and technical problems. She varied her targets, creating the illusion of multiple shooters from different locations. The Taliban commander, his plan unraveling, grew frantic. He made a fatal mistake. He stepped into a clear line of sight for a brief moment, trying to rally his disorganized forces. Ava's crosshairs found him as naturally as she drew breath. The shot was gone before conscious thought could form. 2,212 meters. A shot that defied physics, a testament to skill, technology, and sheer force of will. The commander crumpled to the ground, and with his fall, the enemy's coordinated assault dissolved into chaos. With the enemy command structure shattered, the Taliban fighters devolved into a disorganized mob. Self-preservation replaced tactical discipline. Some scrambled for cover from the phantom sniper they couldn't see, while others pressed their attack with reckless abandon, hoping to overwhelm the SEALs before another impossible shot found its mark. In that window of chaos, Bravo 6 found their chance. All teams, this is Reeves. We're breaking out. Follow me. Sergeant Reeves, the seasoned team leader, coordinated their fighting withdrawal while Thorne, his earlier arrogance burned away and replaced by the hard-won wisdom of combat, led the point. They fought their way up the eastern slope of the valley, a desperate scramble for survival. And as they moved, their path was cleared by an unseen guardian angel. Enemy fighters who moved to intercept them would suddenly fall. RPG gunners would be hit moments before they could fire. The path to safety was being paved with impossibly accurate fire. Shadow 9, this is Bravo 6 actual. Sergeant Reeves transmitted on a desperate, open emergency frequency. I don't know who you are or where you're shooting from, but we are almost in the clear. Can you confirm our extraction route is secure? For the first time since the engagement began, Ava broke her silence. Her voice, filtered through the radio, was calm, professional, and utterly anonymous. Bravo 6, this is Shadow 9. Negative on your primary extraction point. A secondary enemy force is moving to intercept from Grid 37 North. Recommend you divert to alternate route. Follow the ridgeline south to Grid 35. I will provide covering fire. Her voice gave no hint of the strain she was under. She had fired 18 rounds in 17 minutes, each one a miracle of ballistic science. But even as she guided them to safety, her tactical awareness was painting a grim picture on her tablet. The enemy had deployed a quick reaction force from a nearby village, at least 20 fresh fighters. They weren't hunting the SEALs anymore. They were hunting her. They were sweeping the high ground, using thermal optics, searching for the heat signature of the ghost who had single-handedly dismantled their ambush. Her perfect sniper's nest was about to become her tomb. She could leave now. She could slip away into the darkness, her mission accomplished, and let Bravo 6 handle the final leg of their journey. 5 years ago, the doctrine of Task Force Strix would have demanded it, preserve the asset. But 5 years ago, she had followed doctrine, and she had watched her team die. Bravo 6, Shadow 9, she transmitted again, her voice hard as steel. She had made her decision. Be advised, enemy QRF is converging on my position. I'm going to give them something to chase. You will have a clear passage to the extraction zone in approximately 5 minutes. Reeves's response was immediate, his voice filled with a fierce loyalty. Negative, Shadow 9. We don't leave anyone behind. Send your coordinates. We will. Ava cut him off with a bitter laugh that never made it to the microphone. You have 8 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. After that, this mountain is going to get very loud. Shadow 9 out. She switched off the radio before they could argue, severing the connection. She was alone again, just as she had been for the past 5 years. But this time it was by choice. This time, her sacrifice would have meaning. Ava began the delicate process of making herself visible. She fired 3 more times in rapid succession, not aiming at targets, but at rocks, deliberately letting the bright muzzle flash of the M300 betray her position. Through her scope, she watched the enemy thermal signatures converge on her location, their movements excited, eager. They thought they had her cornered. As the first enemy fighters crested the ridge 200 meters away, she was already gone. She left the Chaytak M300 behind, its barrel still warm, its 3 carved notches a silent testament to the debt she had just repaid. It was a warrior's farewell to a faithful weapon. Its purpose was served. What followed became a legend whispered in the darkest corners of the special operations world. For the next hour, Ava led the pursuing Taliban force on a deadly game of cat and mouse through the mountains. She was no longer a sniper. She was a ghost, a phantom of the rocks. She used every trick she had learned in a decade of clandestine warfare. She booby-trapped her back trail with improvised noisemakers and non-lethal snares, designed to slow and confuse rather than kill, forcing the enemy to second-guess every step. She used the terrain as a weapon, leading them into dead-end canyons and across unstable shale slopes where their superior numbers became a liability. Her damaged hearing, her trembling hand. They were limitations she had long since learned to turn into strengths, compensating with a level of hypervigilance and unconventional tactics that would have baffled her instructors. By 4 o'clock, Bravo 6 had reached the alternate extraction point. A Black Hawk swooped out of the darkness, and the 8 exhausted, battered, but living SEALs were pulled aboard. As the helicopter lifted off, Jax Thorne stared out at the dark, menacing mountains. Who was Shadow 9? He asked Reeves over the roar of the rotors. The sergeant just shook his head, his face a mask of awe and grief. I don't know, son. But whoever they were, they just traded their life for ours. Just then, the radio operator in the helicopter shouted, his eyes wide. Sir, I'm picking up something that's weird. It's on an old emergency frequency. It's Morse code. He scribbled frantically on a notepad. The pattern was simple, repeating 3 times before fading into the static. STFEXLEVUS. Night Owl Lives. 2 days later, a recovery team was dispatched to the area. They found the site of Ava's last stand, and the scene told a story of impossible defiance. 11 enemy bodies were scattered across a 300-meter radius. Spent brass casings from 3 different types of weapons lay on the ground, indicating she had been scavenging guns from the fallen and turning them against their comrades. Blood trails in the dirt suggested she had been wounded, perhaps severely, but had kept fighting, moving, and killing long past the point of human endurance. And then the trail simply vanished. No body, no more signs of a struggle. It was as if she had dissolved into the very rock of the mountain. All they recovered was her M300 rifle, its scope still perfectly zeroed, and a single, waterproof page from a notebook weighted down by a rock. The page recovered from Ava's sniper nest was covered in a strange, coded script, a personal shorthand she had developed over years of clandestine operations. When the cryptographers at Bagram Airfield finally broke the code weeks later, they were stunned. It wasn't a final message or a diary entry. It was intelligence. A detailed breakdown of the enemy network in the entire sector, including supply routes, command nodes, and, most importantly, the identities of the double agents within the Afghan National Army who had been feeding false information to coalition forces. It was the most significant intelligence breakthrough of the year. The revelation sent shockwaves through the command structure. The woman they had dismissed as a broken-down armory technician had, in her spare time, single-handedly mapped the entire enemy infrastructure in the region. Jax Thorne was a changed man. The arrogant, cocky boy who had left FOB Atlas was gone, replaced by a quiet, humbled warrior. He would often stand in the now empty corner of the armory where Ava had worked, running a hand over the workbench. The silence of the room, a heavy accusation. He had mocked a giant, and he would carry the shame of it for the rest of his life. Captain Holloway stood in his office, holding the small box of personal effects Ava had left behind. There wasn't much. A few faded photographs of 3 young men, Leo, Marcus, and Javier. A worn unit patch from Task Force Strix, an organization that officially didn't exist. And her notebooks. Dozens of them, filled with the strange code, but also with pages upon pages of technical observations on ballistics, wind reading, and battlefield pattern recognition. It was the life's work of a genius, a revolutionary doctrine for modern sniping. "Sir," a voice said from the doorway. It was Thorne. The intel she left, it's all checking out. Every source, every location. It's a complete roadmap. She did all this while she was in here cleaning our rifles. Holloway nodded slowly, his expression grim. She never stopped being an operator, specialist. She just found a different war to fight. Officially, Ava Reed was listed as missing in action, presumed deceased. It was the second time in her career she had been given that designation. Her story was buried under layers of classification, her existence erased from the official record. But truth has a way of seeping through the cracks of bureaucracy. In the mountains of Afghanistan, a new story began to circulate among the Taliban fighters. They spoke of a ghost, a female spirit or jinn of the mountains, who hunted those who ambushed coalition soldiers. They called her the Mountain Jinn, a spirit of vengeance who could strike from impossible distances and vanish without a trace. The legend grew, and the fear it inspired became a weapon in itself, saving countless American lives as Taliban units began to fear setting ambushes in the high country. Ava's notebooks revolutionized sniper training for the entire U.S. military. A new battlefield analysis system, codenamed Watchkeeper, was developed based on her pattern recognition algorithms. It could predict enemy ambushes with an almost prescient accuracy, saving dozens of lives in its first year of deployment. Jax Thorne started a quiet tradition. Before every single mission, he would perform a final check on his rifle, chamber a round, and whisper, "Foreshadow 9." His teammates, seeing the change in him, started to do the same. The ritual spread, a quiet tribute in the special operations community to the unknown guardian who had taught them that the most dangerous weapon on the battlefield isn't a rifle, but the quiet, observant mind behind it. And sometimes, on quiet nights at remote operating bases across Afghanistan, a radio operator listening on an obsolete emergency frequency would hear something. A faint, untraceable transmission, always in Morse code, always brief, always containing intelligence that would prove to be uncannily accurate. The messages were dismissed by command as atmospheric anomalies, but the operators knew better. They knew that somewhere out there, in the vast, lonely darkness of the mountains, a ghost was still on watch. A guardian who had traded her life not for rest, but for an eternal vigil. Ava Reed's story proves that the greatest heroes are often the ones fighting in the shadows, unseen and unsung. They don't seek medals or recognition. They seek only to complete the mission. Have you ever known a silent guardian in your own life? Someone whose quiet strength protected you? Share your story in the comments below, and let's honor these unsung heroes together. Please comment with respect. Your story is the best tribute we can offer. And don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss another powerful narrative that needs to be heard.